Sometimes the biggest mistake of your life begins with walking through the wrong door. Clara Bennett tightened her fingers around her daughter's tiny hand as the cold wind pushed against them outside the Grand Meridian Hotel in downtown Chicago. The golden letters above the entrance shimmered against the rainy evening sky, far too elegant for someone like her to even stand near for long. Her cheap beige coat was already damp at the sleeves, and the paper delivery invoice folded inside her purse felt softer from the moisture. Beside her, 5-year-old Lily looked up with wide blue eyes and hugged her worn stuffed rabbit close to her chest. "Mommy, is this the place?" Clara forced a small smile, even though her stomach had been tight for the last 20 minutes. "I think so, sweetheart." The bakery owner had begged her to take this last-minute cake delivery after another driver canceled. $50 extra meant groceries for the week. Maybe even enough to finally pay the electric bill before the warning notice became real. Clara pushed open the massive glass door, instantly swallowed by warmth, perfume, and the soft echo of piano music floating through the marble lobby. Everything inside looked expensive enough to make her nervous. Women in glittering gowns crossed the floor in designer heels while men in black tuxedos laughed beside towers of champagne glasses. Clara immediately realized something was wrong. This wasn't a corporate banquet. It was a wedding. A very rich wedding. Her cheeks burned. "Oh no," she whispered under her breath. She quickly checked the paper receipt again. Ballroom 7. But the glowing sign near the elevators read Ballroom 9. She had entered through the wrong side of the hotel. Of course she had. Lily tugged her sleeve gently. "Mommy, everyone looks like princesses." Clara swallowed hard and brushed damp strands of hair behind her ear. "Don't stare, baby. We'll leave in 1 second." But before she could turn around, Lily's stuffed rabbit slipped from her arms and landed directly on the white aisle carpet stretching toward an enormous stage covered in ivory roses. Several guests turned immediately. Clara's heart nearly stopped. "Lily," she whispered sharply, mortified. The little girl hurried forward to grab it, her tiny shoes squeaking softly against the polished floor. At the exact same moment, a tall man standing near the altar stepped down without warning. He bent first and picked up the rabbit before Lily could reach it. The entire ballroom seemed to pause around him. Ethan Calloway. Even Clara recognized him instantly despite not seeing him for years. America's golden billionaire. The face from magazine covers. The man every business channel talked about. Tonight, dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, he looked untouchable, powerful, controlled. The perfect groom. But the second his eyes landed on Lily's face, something inside him visibly shattered. His hand froze around the stuffed rabbit. The color slowly drained from his expression. Lily looked up innocently, completely unaware of the sudden silence spreading through the nearby guests. "Thank you, mister," she said softly. Ethan didn't answer. He simply stared at her pale blonde hair, her tiny nose, her blue eyes. Clara's pulse slammed painfully against her ribs. No, 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 no. Not here. Not tonight. She stepped forward immediately and took Lily's hand too quickly. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, unable to fully look at him. "We walked into the wrong ballroom." But Ethan still wasn't looking at Clara. His entire focus remained locked on the child standing in front of him. The child who looked painfully familiar. Around them, confused whispers slowly began moving through the guests. The bride standing near the floral arch glanced over with irritation already growing across her flawless face. Clara could barely breathe anymore. Every instinct screamed at her to leave immediately. Yet for some reason, Ethan Calloway still hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't even blinked. Lily tilted her head curiously before asking the one question Clara feared most. "Mommy," she whispered softly enough that only a few people nearby could hear. "Why does he look at me like he knows me?" The silence inside the ballroom stretched so long that Clara could suddenly hear the faint ticking of crystal chandeliers above her head. Ethan. Calloway still held Lily's stuffed rabbit in one hand while staring at the little girl as if the entire wedding around him had disappeared. Clara felt her throat tighten painfully. She had imagined many terrible scenarios over the last 5 years, but none of them looked like this. Not under golden lights. Not in front of hundreds of wealthy strangers. Not with Ethan standing only a few feet away wearing another woman's wedding ring waiting on his finger. "Sir?" One of the wedding coordinators whispered nervously near the stage. Ethan did not respond. Lily blinked up at him innocently, shifting slightly behind Clara's leg. "Mommy," she whispered again. "Did I do something bad?" Clara immediately crouched beside her daughter and forced calm into her voice, even though her hands had started trembling. "No, sweetheart. Everything is okay." But it was not okay. Clara could feel eyes everywhere now. Guests were quietly murmuring to each other while pretending not to stare. Several women seated near the aisle glanced between Ethan and Lily with growing confusion. The resemblance was subtle at first glance, but impossible to ignore once noticed. The same pale blue eyes. The same sharp curve near the chin. Even the way Lily tilted her head looked painfully familiar. Ethan slowly lowered himself to one knee in front of the child, still silent for another long second. His expression had changed completely from the polished confidence he wore moments earlier. Now he looked shaken. "Human, what is your name?" he finally asked softly. Lily clutched her rabbit tighter after he handed it back. "Lily Bennett." Ethan repeated the name quietly under his breath, like it meant something dangerous. Clara stood immediately. "We should go." She reached for Lily's hand, desperate to escape before things became worse. But just as they turned toward the exit, Lily suddenly pressed a small hand against her stomach. Her tiny face twisted with discomfort. "Mommy." Clara's panic instantly shifted. "What is wrong?" "My tummy hurts again." Clara knelt beside her quickly. The long bus ride downtown and the slice of cheap pizza they had shared hours earlier were probably not helping. Lily had been complaining on and off all week, but Clara could not afford another doctor visit after the last urgent care bill. "I am okay," Lily whispered bravely, though her eyes looked watery. Ethan noticed immediately. "She is sick." Clara avoided his eyes. "She is fine." "She does not look fine." His voice carried quiet authority that still made Clara's chest tighten exactly the way it used to years ago. Before she could answer, a sharp feminine voice cut across the ballroom. "Ethan." The bride finally approached them, her diamond heels clicking against the marble floor. Victoria Langford looked stunning in an expensive white gown covered in delicate crystals, but the smile on her face had already disappeared. She glanced at Clara's worn coat, then at Lily, then back to Ethan with visible irritation. "The ceremony starts in 10 minutes. Ethan barely looked at her. His attention remained fixed on Lily, whose face had become paler. Clara picked her daughter up gently into her arms. "I said we are leaving." She turned again, but Lily suddenly winced quietly against her shoulder. Ethan stepped forward instantly. "Wait." Clara froze. The firmness in his voice sent an old memory rushing through her chest like cold rain. Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket without taking his eyes off Lily. "Get the hotel physician upstairs now," he said calmly into the phone. "Ballroom 9. Clara stared at him in disbelief. "That is not necessary. A child feeling sick is always necessary." Victoria's expression darkened immediately. "Ethan, seriously?" But he ignored her completely. That hurt Clara more than it should have. Because years ago, Ethan used to look at her with that same complete focus, as if nothing else in the world mattered once he decided to care. Lily rested her head weakly against Clara's shoulder, while soft whispers spread louder through the guests nearby. Someone near the back quietly murmured, "That little girl looks exactly like him." Clara's heartbeat nearly stopped. Ethan heard it too. She could see it in the sudden tension that entered his jaw. For the first time since she walked into the ballroom, Ethan finally lifted his eyes fully toward Clara. And the second he did, she realized something terrifying. He was beginning to remember her. Clara felt the room closing around her the moment Ethan looked directly into her eyes. For a second, neither of them spoke. The music continued softly somewhere near the grand piano. Guests kept whispering behind crystal glasses. Cameras from the wedding photographer flashed near the floral arch, but none of it seemed real anymore. Ethan's expression shifted slowly from confusion into something far more dangerous. Recognition. Clara immediately looked away first. "Lily, say thank you to the gentleman," she whispered quietly while adjusting her daughter higher against her shoulder. "Then we are leaving." "Thank you," Lily said politely, though her small voice sounded tired now. Ethan still did not move aside. His eyes remained fixed on Clara's face like he was trying to pull memories out of the past one painful piece at a time. "Clara," he finally said. Just hearing her name and his voice again after 6 years nearly shattered the fragile control she had left. She forced herself to stay calm. "You are getting married," she replied softly. "Congratulations." Victoria crossed her arms beside Ethan, visibly irritated now by the growing attention from guests. "Ethan, who exactly is this?" Clara noticed the sharp judgment in the bride's eyes immediately. The expensive gown, perfect makeup, diamond earrings that probably cost more than Clara's entire apartment rent for a year. Clara suddenly became painfully aware of the worn soles of her shoes and the fading fabric near the cuffs of her coat. She looked like she did not belong inside this ballroom. Because she did not. Ethan ignored Victoria's question completely. "You disappeared," he said quietly to Clara, almost as if no one else existed around them. Clara's throat tightened. "This is not the place." "Then where is?" The question hit harder than she expected. Before Clara could answer, Lily shifted weakly again in her arms. Ethan noticed instantly. "The doctor is on the way." "That is not necessary," Clara repeated. "I can take care of my daughter myself." "I did not say you could not." The calm firmness in his voice made old emotions rise, dangerously close to the surface. Ethan had always spoken that way when he cared too much about something or someone. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice sharply. "Ethan, the guests are literally waiting for us." Several people nearby pretended not to watch, while very obviously watching everything. Clara heard whispers moving through the crowd again. "Who is she? Look at the little girl. Does not she have his eyes?" Heat crawled up Clara's neck. Humiliation spread through her chest so heavily she could barely breathe. She wanted the marble floor to open beneath her and swallow her whole. A wedding coordinator approached nervously. "Mr. Calloway, should we delay the ceremony another few minutes?" Ethan never looked away from Clara. "Yes." The answer sent another wave of murmurs through the ballroom. Victoria stared at him in disbelief. "You are delaying our wedding because of some random woman?" Clara flinched at the words, even though she should have expected them. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "She is not random." The silence after that sentence felt deafening. Clara looked at him sharply, panic rising inside her chest. He could not say things like that here. Not now. Not in front of everyone. Lily suddenly leaned her head against Clara's shoulder again and whispered softly, "Mommy, I feel hot." Clara touched her forehead gently and felt the warmth immediately. Worry replaced everything else for a moment. "Sweetheart." Ethan noticed Clara's expression change. Without hesitation, he removed his tuxedo jacket and held it toward Lily. "Wrap her in this." Clara stared at him, stunned. The gesture felt far too intimate for a man standing minutes away from marrying another woman. "I am fine," she said quickly. "Take it," Ethan repeated quietly. Victoria let out a short laugh filled with disbelief. "You cannot be serious right now." Ethan still ignored her. That seemed to hurt the bride more with every passing second. Clara hated this entire situation. The stares, the whispers, the pity. She could already imagine what people were thinking when they looked at her. Poor single mother crashes billionaire wedding with suspicious child. The shame burned through her chest. She adjusted Lily carefully and stepped backward toward the ballroom exit. "We should go before we ruin your evening any further." But just as she turned, an older woman near the front row suddenly whispered something loud enough for several nearby guests to hear. "That child looks exactly like Ethan when he was little." Clara froze instantly. And this time, Ethan did not deny it. The ballroom no longer sounded like a wedding to Clara. It sounded like judgment. Every whisper seemed louder now, bouncing beneath the crystal chandeliers while guests stared openly at Lily and then back at Ethan. Clara tightened her hold on her daughter and forced herself not to panic. She had spent years building a quiet life far away from this world, and in less than 15 minutes, everything was beginning to crack apart. Ethan remained completely still after hearing the older woman's comment. His face revealed almost nothing, but Clara knew him well enough to notice the subtle changes. The tension near his jaw, the distant look in his eyes, the way his breathing slowed whenever his mind was racing too fast. He was remembering, and that terrified her more than anything. "Ethan," Victoria said sharply, stepping closer beside him. "Say something." But his attention remained locked on Clara. "How old is she?" The question came quietly. Clara's stomach dropped instantly. Around them, the ballroom somehow became even quieter. Lily shifted sleepily against Clara's shoulder while Clara searched desperately for a way to avoid the answer. "We should leave," she whispered instead. Ethan took one slow step forward. "How old is your daughter, Clara?" Hearing him say her name again after all these years felt dangerous. Intimate. Familiar in a way it should not anymore. Clara lowered her eyes. 5. Ethan's expression changed instantly. Not dramatically, not loudly, but Clara saw it happen. Something behind his eyes tightened with painful realization. Because he was counting. 6 years ago. The rain. The apartment in Boston. The last night they spent together before everything fell apart. Clara could see the memory returning to him piece by piece. Her chest hurt so badly. She could barely breathe. Victoria noticed the shift too. "What is going on?" she demanded. Ethan did not answer her immediately. His gaze remained fixed on Lily's face. The little girl blinked tiredly, then softly rested her cheek against Clara's shoulder again. Ethan stared at her tiny profile for several long seconds before speaking almost to himself. Blue eyes. Clara felt cold all over. Years ago, Ethan used to joke that if he ever had a daughter, she would inherit his eyes because everyone in the Calloway family did. At the time, she had laughed and kissed him beneath the fire escape outside his apartment while summer rain dripped onto the streets below them. Back then, they had been young enough to believe love alone could survive anything. Clara forced the memory away immediately. "This conversation is inappropriate," she said carefully. "Especially today." Ethan finally looked toward Victoria, standing beside him in her wedding gown. For the first time all evening, he seemed to remember where he was. Cameras from hired photographers still hovered nervously nearby. Guests remained seated, pretending not to watch while absolutely everyone watched. The entire ballroom had become suspended in uncomfortable anticipation. Victoria folded her arms tightly. "I would also love to understand why my fiancé is staring at another woman and her child instead of marrying me." Clara's face burned with humiliation. "I am sorry," she said quickly. None of this was intentional. She meant every word. She had not come here to destroy anyone's wedding. She had not even known Ethan was the groom until she walked inside. Ethan glanced back at Clara again, his expression softer now, but somehow more intense. "Why did you disappear?" The question landed directly in the center of her chest. Clara looked away immediately toward the marble floor. She remembered the last voicemail she had left him 6 years ago while crying in a bus station bathroom, with only $80 left in her purse. She remembered waiting for him to call back. He never did. Ethan took another slow step closer. "I searched for you." Clara's fingers tightened around Lily's coat sleeve. "Please stop." "You." Left without a single explanation. "Because I did not have a choice." The words escaped before Clara could stop them. Ethan's eyes sharpened instantly. Before he could ask another question, the elevator doors near the ballroom entrance opened. A gray-haired hotel physician hurried inside carrying a medical bag. Ethan immediately turned toward him. "Check the little girl." Clara opened her mouth to protest again, but Lily suddenly coughed softly against her shoulder and looked even paler than before. The doctor approached gently. "May I?" Clara hesitated for only a second before carefully lowering Lily into a nearby chair. The tiny white seat looked enormous around her small frame. Ethan remained standing close beside them, watching every movement with unsettling intensity. The doctor checked Lily's temperature while the ballroom stayed almost completely silent around them. Finally, he looked up calmly. "She likely has a mild fever from exhaustion and dehydration." Clara felt embarrassed immediately. "We took the bus downtown," she admitted quietly. "She has not eaten much since this morning." Ethan's expression darkened at those words. Deeply, and for the first time that night, Clara saw something far more dangerous than recognition appear in his eyes. Guilt. The word dehydration seemed to echo through Ethan's mind long after the doctor said it. Clara noticed the exact moment guilt settled into his expression because his eyes dropped immediately toward Lily's tiny shoes. The soles were worn thin near the edges. One lace had been tied twice to keep it from breaking apart completely. Ethan stared at them for several silent seconds before finally looking back at Clara. "She has not eaten since this morning?" Clara hated how ashamed she suddenly felt answering him. "We are fine." Ethan's jaw tightened again at the automatic response. He remembered that phrase. Clara used to say it every time she was struggling and trying to hide it. Back when she worked double shifts at a coffee shop while attending nursing classes at night. Back when she smiled through exhaustion because she hated appearing weak in front of anyone. Especially him. The doctor packed away his thermometer gently. "She needs fluids, rest, and food. Nothing severe, but she should not stay standing much longer." Ethan nodded immediately. "Prepare one of the hotel suites upstairs." Clara looked at him in disbelief. "No, she needs somewhere quiet." We are not staying here. Victoria finally stepped forward again, her patience visibly gone now. I am sorry, but has everyone forgotten this is our wedding? Her voice carried sharply across the ballroom, forcing even more guests to turn fully toward the scene. Clara wished she could disappear. Every second inside this room made her feel smaller, poorer, more exposed. She adjusted Lily carefully in her arms. You do not owe us anything, she said quietly to Ethan. We will leave. Ethan's eyes followed the movement of Lily leaning weakly against Clara's shoulder. You rode a bus here in this weather with a sick child? Clara looked away instead of answering. That silence told him enough. Ethan removed the cufflinks from his sleeves slowly, almost absently, like his thoughts were no longer connected to the wedding at all. The sight unsettled Victoria immediately. Ethan. He did not look at her. Get room service ready upstairs. Soup. Water. Anything a child would eat. A nearby assistant hurried to obey without hesitation. Clara felt humiliation crawl through her chest again. She did not want charity, especially not from him. 6 years ago, Ethan Calloway had been the center of her entire world. The brilliant young businessman who kissed her like she mattered. The man who once stayed awake all night helping her study anatomy flashcards because he said her dreams mattered as much as his own. But that life was gone. Whatever they once were had disappeared the day she walked away carrying a secret she believed would destroy him. Mommy, Lily whispered weakly, touching Clara's cheek gently. I am sleepy. Clara brushed soft blonde hair away from her daughter's forehead. I know, baby. Ethan watched the interaction carefully, and Clara could practically feel the questions forming behind his eyes now. The timeline, the age, the resemblance. He was putting pieces together faster than she had hoped. Victoria suddenly laughed softly, though there was nothing warm about it. This is unbelievable. She looked directly at Clara now. How much do you want? Clara blinked in confusion. Excuse me. Women do this all the time around wealthy men, especially before weddings. Several nearby guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Clara felt heat rise instantly into her face. That is not why I am here. Victoria smiled coldly. Then why are you here? Clara opened her mouth, but no words came. Because the truth sounded impossible. She had simply walked into the wrong ballroom. One wrong elevator. One wrong hallway. And somehow her entire past had crashed directly into her future. Ethan finally turned toward Victoria, his expression colder than Clara had ever seen before. Enough. The single word silenced the room immediately. Victoria stared at him in shock. You are defending her? I am asking you to stop humiliating someone who clearly wants to leave. Clara swallowed hard. Hearing Ethan defend her in front of everyone only made the situation more unbearable. Because a small part of her still remembered what it felt like to be protected by him. And that memory was dangerous. Victoria folded her arms tightly. People are talking, Ethan. Let them. Clara saw several guests glance toward Lily again. The whispers had not stopped once. In fact, they were spreading farther now across the ballroom. Ethan noticed it too. His eyes returned slowly toward Lily's sleeping face. Then lower, toward the tiny silver necklace around her neck that had slipped free beneath her sweater. Clara's heart nearly stopped. The pendant hanging there was small and simple. A silver compass. Ethan had given Clara that necklace on her 21st birthday years ago, telling her that no matter where life took them, she would always find her way back to him. Clara reached instinctively to cover it, but she was already too late. Ethan's entire expression changed the second he recognized it. Clara saw the exact second Ethan recognized the silver compass necklace around Lily's neck. The color faded slightly from his face, and for the first time all evening, the powerful billionaire standing in front of hundreds of guests looked completely unguarded. His eyes locked onto the tiny pendant like it had reached into the past and pulled something broken back to life. Clara instinctively covered the necklace with Lily's sweater, but the damage was already done. Ethan remembered everything connected to it. The little jewelry shop near Boston Harbor. The rainstorm outside. The way Clara laughed when he told her a compass only mattered if someone was worth finding again. 6 years disappeared from his eyes all at once. You still have it, he said quietly. Clara swallowed hard. Lily was cold after she was born. I put it on her one night and never took it off. Ethan stared at the child sleeping weakly against her shoulder. The ballroom around them no longer mattered to him. Clara could see that clearly now. Every guest, every camera, Every flower arrangement worth thousands of dollars had faded into the background while he looked at Lily. Victoria stepped closer again, disbelief written across her face. You gave her jewelry? Ethan did not answer immediately. He looked at Clara instead. After all this time, his voice lowered. Why would you put my necklace on her? Clara's heartbeat became painfully uneven. She had spent years preparing herself for difficult questions, but not like this. Not with strangers listening. Not while another woman stood beside him in a wedding dress. Because it reminded me of someone who once cared about us, she whispered before she could stop herself. Silence crashed through the ballroom. Ethan's expression changed instantly at the word us. Victoria stared between them now, slowly realizing this situation was far more serious than she originally believed. What exactly is she talking about? She demanded. Ethan still did not look away from Clara. Did you ever try to contact me after you left? Clara almost laughed at the irony of the question. Instead, she looked toward the polished marble floor and answered softly. Every day for 3 weeks. Ethan frowned immediately. That is impossible. I called your number until it stopped connecting. I never changed my number. Clara finally lifted her eyes toward him again. Then someone blocked me. Ethan's expression darkened sharply. The possibility hit him visibly. Someone had interfered. Someone had made sure Clara disappeared from his life completely. Victoria folded her arms tightly, her patience cracking apart. This is insane. Ethan, these people are manipulating you. Clara flinched at the word people. Ethan's eyes turned cold immediately. Do not talk about them like that. Several guests nearby exchanged shocked looks. Ethan Calloway was famous for being calm under pressure. Controlled. Precise. Yet tonight he sounded emotionally involved in a way none of them had likely ever seen before. Victoria noticed too. You cannot seriously believe this child has anything to do with you. Ethan looked at Lily again. The resemblance had become impossible to ignore now that everyone had seen it. Even sleeping against Clara's shoulder, the little girl looked painfully connected to him. Same eyes. Same pale lashes. Same tiny line near the chin when she frowned in her sleep. Ethan spoke quietly without taking his eyes off Lily. How old was she when you put that necklace on her? Clara hesitated. A few hours old. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Clara could almost see him calculating dates again in his mind. The last night they spent together. The timeline. The age. The necklace. Every answer only pointed him toward one terrifying possibility. A hotel employee approached nervously beside them. Mr. Calloway, the guests are asking if the ceremony is canceled. The entire ballroom seemed to stop breathing, waiting for his answer. Victoria looked horrified. Ethan. But he did not answer the employee immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to Clara until only a small distance separated them. His voice dropped low enough that only she could hear clearly. Tell me the truth. Clara's chest tightened painfully. This is not the place. Then tell me anyway. She looked at him and suddenly saw flashes of the man she once loved instead of the billionaire standing in front of her now. The exhausted college student who used to fall asleep on her couch while pretending he was not scared of failing his first company. The man who once kissed her forehead and promised he would never let her face life alone. Clara had spent years trying to hate him for abandoning her, but standing this close to him again made that impossible. Lily stirred softly in her arms before murmuring sleepily, Mommy. Ethan's eyes softened instantly at the sound of her voice. Then Lily opened her tired blue eyes halfway and looked directly at him. Are you the man from my mommy's picture? Clara froze. Completely. Ethan's breathing stopped for one stunned second. And across the ballroom, Victoria slowly realized her wedding was beginning to fall apart. The entire ballroom seemed to stop breathing after Lily's question. Clara felt her heart drop, so hard it almost hurt physically. Ethan stood motionless in front of them, his eyes fixed completely on the little girl still wrapped in Clara's arms. Around them, crystal glasses remained frozen halfway to lips. Whispered conversations died instantly, and even the wedding pianist near the stage slowly stopped playing after sensing something had shifted beyond repair. Lily blinked sleepily, unaware of the storm she had just created. Mommy keeps your picture in a box, she continued softly. You looked younger there. Clara closed her eyes for one terrible second. She had never hidden Ethan from Lily completely. No matter how much she tried to move on, there had always been one photograph she could never throw away. A faded picture taken on a rooftop in Boston 6 years earlier, where Ethan was laughing at something outside the camera frame while holding Clara's hand. Lily had found it accidentally one winter during a power outage. Since then, she occasionally asked questions Clara never fully answered. Ethan looked shaken in a way Clara had never seen before. Not even years ago when his first company nearly collapsed. His entire carefully controlled world seemed to be slipping through his fingers in front of everyone watching. "You kept my picture?" he asked quietly. Clara lowered her eyes immediately. "Lily asks questions. And what do you tell her?" Clara swallowed hard. "That some people leave even when they do not mean to." Ethan's expression tightened painfully at the words. Victoria stared. Between them now with growing horror as pieces finally began fitting together. "No," she whispered almost to herself. "No, this is not happening." Ethan barely seemed to hear her. His eyes remained fixed on Clara and Lily like nothing else existed anymore. Clara hated the dangerous warmth still buried deep inside her chest whenever he looked at them that way. Because 6 years ago, Ethan used to look at her exactly like this before kissing her forehead and promising they would build a future together. A future that never happened. Victoria suddenly stepped forward sharply. "Tell me this is some misunderstanding." Ethan remained silent. That silence answered her more than words could. Clara shifted Lily carefully higher against her shoulder again. "We never came here to ruin anything," she said softly. "I should go." Ethan immediately looked at her. No, the firmness in his voice startled even him. Clara stared at him in disbelief. "Ethan, do not leave." Victoria let out a stunned laugh filled with hurt. "You are asking her to stay?" Ethan finally turned toward his fiancée for the first time in several minutes. "I am asking everyone to stop pretending this situation is simple." Murmurs spread harder across the ballroom. Several guests had already begun discreetly pulling out phones beneath tables, while others exchanged shocked glances. Ethan Calloway postponing his own wedding over another woman and child would become tomorrow's biggest headline before sunrise. Clara felt sick at the thought. She had spent years protecting Lily from public attention, from gossip, from the powerful Calloway family that once made her feel invisible and unwanted. She could not let this become a spectacle. "Please," Clara whispered to Ethan. "Do not do this here." Ethan stepped closer until his voice dropped lower. "Then tell me the truth somewhere else." Clara looked away immediately because she knew exactly what truth he meant, and she was terrified of saying it out loud. Not because she doubted it anymore. The resemblance alone had destroyed that possibility hours ago. But because once Ethan heard the words, everything would change forever. Lily stirred softly again before, looking up at Ethan with tired curiosity. "Are you rich?" Several nearby guests blinked in surprise at the innocent question. Ethan actually looked caught off guard for the first time all evening. "I suppose so," he answered quietly. Lily nodded seriously. "Mommy says rich people are busy." Clara felt embarrassed instantly. "Lily," but Ethan's expression softened in a way that made Clara's chest ache unexpectedly. "Your mommy is probably right." Lily studied him another moment before asking softly, "Then why are you looking sad?" The question hit harder than any accusation could have. Ethan stared at her silently, almost like he did not know how to answer. Because the truth was sitting directly in front of him. A little girl with his eyes. His necklace. His smile hidden somewhere beneath exhaustion. A child he had never known existed. Victoria's voice suddenly cracked across the ballroom. "I cannot stand here like this anymore." Clara turned instinctively toward her. The bride's eyes had filled with humiliation and anger beneath the ballroom lights. "Tell me honestly, Ethan." Her voice trembled slightly now. "Is that your daughter?" The question landed heavily over everyone in the room. Ethan looked toward Lily again, then slowly toward Clara. Clara felt tears threatening dangerously behind her eyes because deep down, she already knew what his answer would be. Ethan inhaled once slowly before speaking the words that changed everything. "I think she might be." The silence after Ethan's words felt unbearable. Clara could hear nothing except the pounding of her own heartbeat while hundreds of eyes locked onto them from every corner of the ballroom. "I think she might be." The sentence hung heavily in the air like something impossible to take back. Victoria stared at Ethan as though she no longer recognized the man standing in front of her. "Might be," she repeated quietly, her voice shaking now. "You are telling me there is a chance you have a child with another woman?" Ethan finally looked toward her fully, but there was no certainty left in his expression anymore. Only shock, regret, and something deeper Clara could not bear to look at for too long. "I did not." No, he said honestly. Victoria let out a hollow laugh that sounded painfully close to tears. This is happening on our wedding day. Clara immediately tightened her hold on Lily and stepped backward. I never wanted this. Ethan's eyes snapped back toward her instantly. Clara, stop apologizing for something that is not your fault. The words hit her harder than they should have. Because for years, Clara had carried every piece of this alone. The pregnancy, the fear, the nights Lily cried with fever while Clara sat awake beside her counting unpaid bills on the kitchen table. The shame of being abandoned by the only man she ever truly loved. Even now, a part of her still believed she deserved all of it. Victoria wiped quickly beneath her eyes before anger replaced the hurt on her face. Do you understand what this looks like? She demanded. There are investors here. Reporters. My family. Ethan answered quietly, but firmly. There is a child involved. And there is also your fiancé, standing in front of you. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, as if the pressure around him had finally become too much. Clara suddenly realized he looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Like his entire world had shifted within the span of 1 hour. Lily stirred again in Clara's arms before whispering softly, Mommy, can we go home? Clara kissed the top of her daughter's head immediately. Yes, sweetheart. She turned toward the exit before Ethan moved suddenly in front of her again. Not aggressively. Desperately. Do not disappear again. The raw honesty in his voice nearly broke her. Clara looked away because if she looked directly into his eyes too long, she was afraid old feelings would swallow her completely. You are about to get married. Ethan glanced toward the altar covered in white roses and candlelight. For several long seconds, he said nothing. Then slowly, he reached toward his collar and loosened his tie like he could no longer breathe inside the perfect image everyone expected from him. The simple movement sent whispers racing through the ballroom again. Victoria stared at him in disbelief. Ethan, but he interrupted softly. I cannot do this right now. Clara froze instantly. Do not say that. Ethan looked at her with painful intensity. How am I supposed to stand at that altar pretending none of this matters? Victoria's face lost color. You are choosing her? This is not about choosing anyone. It clearly is. Clara felt trapped between them, humiliated all over again by being the reason another woman's life was collapsing publicly. She never wanted to become that person. Please stop, she whispered. Both of you. Ethan looked back at Clara immediately. I need answers. Clara's eyes filled dangerously with tears she refused to let fall. And what happens after that? She asked softly. You suddenly become a father overnight? You suddenly fix 6 years. Ethan stared at her in silence because he had no answer. The truth sat painfully between them. Nothing about this could be repaired quickly. Too much time had already been lost. Too many nights Clara had cried alone while raising Lily without him. Yet despite everything, Ethan could not stop looking at the little girl in her arms. Like every instinct inside him already recognized her somehow. Victoria finally removed the engagement ring from her finger with trembling hands. Several nearby guests gasped softly. I am not standing here while you look at another woman like she is your entire world, she said quietly. Ethan's expression darkened immediately. Victoria. But she stepped back before he could continue. No. Whatever this is, you need to figure it out. Because right now you are already gone. Clara watched silently as Victoria turned and walked away from the ballroom, disappearing through the crowd of stunned guests and flashing cameras. The massive room erupted into whispers immediately afterward. The wedding was over. Ethan remained completely still for several seconds after Victoria left. Then slowly, almost carefully, he looked back toward Lily again. The child blinked sleepily at him before holding her stuffed rabbit closer. Ethan's voice became softer than Clara had ever heard it before. Can I ask her one question? Clara hesitated, then slowly nodded once. Ethan crouched slightly until he was closer to Lily's eye level. Do you know what your birthday is? Lily answered innocently, without hesitation. And the second Ethan heard the date, every remaining doubt disappeared from his face. The moment Lily said her birthday aloud, Ethan's entire expression fell apart. Clara watched the realization hit him fully this time, with nowhere left to hide from it. June 17th. The exact date he had once circled on a calendar 6 years ago, while teasing Clara that summer babies always inherited stubborn personalities. He remembered everything now. The tiny apartment in Boston. The thunderstorm outside the windows. Clara asleep against his chest while he whispered impossible dreams about the future. And now standing in front of him was a little girl born exactly when she should have been. His daughter. Ethan slowly lowered his gaze toward the floor for a second, as though the weight of those lost years had suddenly become too heavy to carry standing upright. When he looked back at Lily again, his eyes were different. Softer. Broken in a way Clara had never seen before. June 17th, he repeated quietly. Lily nodded sleepily. I turned 5. Ethan swallowed hard. Clara felt tears threatening again, because she could see the truth settling into him completely now. Not as a theory, not as suspicion, as reality. Ethan looked at Clara with painful disbelief. You had my child alone. The sentence sounded less like anger and more like heartbreak. Clara looked away immediately because hearing those words out loud made the loneliness of the last 5 years feel painfully real again. I tried to tell you, she whispered. I know. Ethan's voice cracked slightly on the last word. That alone stunned Clara more than anything else tonight. Ethan Calloway was famous for never losing composure. Yet now he looked like a man standing in the ruins of his own life. Lily rubbed her tired eyes softly before studying Ethan again with innocent curiosity. Mommy cries when she looks at your picture sometimes. Clara closed her eyes in humiliation. Lily. But Ethan looked devastated by the statement. Completely devastated. Around them, guests still whispered quietly while hotel staff awkwardly avoided eye contact. The elegant wedding had transformed into something entirely different now. Something raw and painfully human. Ethan stepped closer slowly, careful not to frighten Lily. Can I hold her? Clara's heart stopped for one terrifying second. She should have said no. Every instinct told her to protect herself before Ethan changed his mind tomorrow and returned to his billionaire world where she never belonged. But Lily was already looking at him with quiet interest instead of fear. Clara hesitated only a moment longer before gently transferring Lily into Ethan's arms. The second Ethan held her, something inside him visibly changed. His entire body softened around the child instinctively, like some part of him had always been waiting for this moment without knowing it. Lily blinked sleepily up at him while clutching her stuffed rabbit. Ethan stared down at her with stunned wonder, almost like he could not believe she was real. Clara suddenly remembered the night Ethan once admitted he was terrified of becoming like his father someday. Cold. Distant. Too busy building an empire to notice his own family disappearing around him. But looking at him now, Clara saw none of that emptiness. Only love arriving far too late. Ethan brushed a small strand of blonde hair away from Lily's forehead with shaking fingers. Hi, sweetheart, he whispered softly. Lily studied him for another long second before asking the question Clara had feared all night. Are you my daddy? The ballroom disappeared completely around Clara after those words. Ethan's eyes filled instantly with emotion he could no longer hide. He looked toward Clara once, almost asking permission silently. Clara could barely breathe anymore, but after everything tonight, she realized there was no point hiding the truth another second. Slowly, she nodded. Ethan looked back at Lily, his voice quieter than a whisper. Yes. Lily blinked at him for a moment before smiling faintly despite her exhaustion. I knew it. Clara finally felt tears slide down her cheeks after holding them back all evening. Ethan noticed immediately. Without thinking, he stepped closer while still holding Lily carefully against his chest. Clara, she shook her head quickly, trying to wipe her face. I did not want this to happen like this. Ethan looked around the ruined wedding ballroom, filled with stunned strangers and unfinished champagne glasses. Neither did I. Then his gaze returned to her completely. But I am grateful it happened at all. Clara stared at him silently, because part of her still did not know whether to trust this moment. Rich men made promises every day. Powerful men changed their minds every day. But Ethan seemed to understand that fear already because his next words came slowly and carefully. I cannot fix the years I missed. His voice lowered. But if you let me, I want to be here now. Clara looked at him holding Lily beneath the soft golden ballroom lights, and for the first time in years, the loneliness inside her chest eased slightly. Not disappeared, but softened. Ethan adjusted Lily gently in his arms before glancing toward the giant windows overlooking the rainy Chicago skyline. Then he looked back at Clara with quiet determination. Come upstairs with me tonight, he said softly. No reporters. No guests. No more hiding. Clara hesitated, But before she could answer, Ethan's assistant hurried nervously through the ballroom doors holding a sealed envelope. "Mr. Calloway," he whispered urgently. "This just arrived from your mother's estate attorney." Ethan frowned slightly and opened it one-handed while still holding Lily close against him. The moment he unfolded the letter, the color slowly disappeared from his face again.